Last month, we launched a series that hopefully will be carried on monthly that brings in people from the community, from a range of different perspectives, and opens up the cases for them and exposes the public to their perspectives on the collection and objects in the collection. So, today we are very, very honored to have with us Sarah Archer, who is a design historian, probably not, I'm not going to say this right, but historian, writer, curator extraordinaire. And she also lives here in our fair city. So I'm very, very excited to have Sarah with us today. She's going to talk about some pretty objects from our collection. So Sarah, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I have to say that also we're very excited to have you in our fair city, now that it's relatively new, both to Philadelphia and to the center. So that's very exciting for all of us. So I'm curious, who has or had nesting dolls as a kid? Lots of people. And where did you get them? Yes. So somewhere, parents, grandparents, they were like around, is that more or less?
My family's Ukrainian.
Brilliant. So you just had access.
Everywhere.
And your parents are from Ukraine originally?
My mom.
Wow.
Side of the family.
And is that more or less sort of so people, they were kind of family objects and they were
Yeah. Hung around the house in like pieces like these, really.
in vitrines?
Not played with.
Right. Never defiled, but just admired. Yeah, exactly. I had a set, we were just talking about this before, I don't know where they came from. I have this vague idea that it was probably like a parent's friend's business trip to the Soviet Union or something, but I had them, I was obsessed, I played with them, I was always losing like halves or bottoms, and so they never fit together properly, but I just was so entranced as kids, that I guess grown-up kids are, by anything that's miniature. And I always assumed, I was a kind of minor league Russophile as a kid, I studied Russian a little bit in high school, I assumed that these went back centuries, that they were sort of of a piece with like onion dome architecture and icons, that they went back many, many hundreds of years in Russian culture. And I was really, really surprised and fascinated to learn that that is not true. I was amazed to discover that they are a product of what you might consider the Russian arts and crafts movement. Is everybody aware of what the arts and crafts movement is in the United States? More or less, but very quickly. Industrial Revolution, 1850s to 1870s, prompted a big kind of turning back to the medieval, the sort of craftsmanship, a sense of alarm about machines and machinery and what it would do to society and to human bodies in a lot of cases, and skill, and the revival of a lot of folk art in Great Britain, in the United States, kind of a love of things like Shaker furniture and the development of things like Stickley, all things that you can learn about here at the center, became very, very popular. And Russia was not a big industrial power, but it was a modernizing power, and there was a lot of Western influence. So there were versions of the kind of artist colonies that we had here in the US, places like Birdcliff. I'm going to refer to my notes to pronounce these because I do not speak Russian fluently, but to give you kind of the broad strokes. The first set of nesting dolls, which I actually posted on my Instagram, if you go, you can see that photo, was produced in 1890. They were made at an estate called Abramtsevo, which was run by a wealthy industrialist named Sava Mamontov. Anybody who's fluent in Russian, please feel free to weigh in. And he purchased it from a writer named Sergei Askakov. He wanted to create a sort of artist colony for Slavophilic crafts. So there are buildings there that kind of look medieval, but were built in the 19th century. And they made furniture, they made silk with Russian motifs and Slavic motifs. Rimsky-Korsakov's The Snow Maiden was produced there. There were dancers and actors and musicians. And anything that had kind of Russian folkloric themes was fair game. And so the first dolls were carved by a woodworker named Vasily Zvyodochkin, based on a design by a folk craft painter named Sergei Nalyutin. Is that okay?
Отлично.
Okay. This is a little challenging. And that first set was relatively subdued in color. They were actually not the kind of bright, vivid colors that you're used to. There was sort of a girl holding a rooster, kind of teenage girl, 6 interior dolls, girls and boys, and then like the teeny tiny little doll that's like this guy is a baby. Mrs. Mamontova, let's say, Sava Mamontov's wife, brought them to the Exposition Universelle in Paris in 1900, where they were adored by people who saw them. They won a bronze medal for toys, and they started to attract attention. And they started to be produced in various places throughout Russia, particularly in the Upper Volga region, where there's a lot of linden trees and birch trees. Those are the 2 woods of which they're made. And it's not really clear exactly what their prehistory is. There is a sense generally that they could be related to certain Asian style of traditional dolls, Japanese kokeshi dolls, which are also made on a lathe, or possibly Yoruba dolls, but it's not really clear to what extent Malgutin and Zobodochkin were aware of that, so it's a little bit hard to say. But in terms of what they wear, they capture a real sort of sense of the Russian bucolic, pre-industrial countryside. They wear dresses that are known as sarafan, and which are kind of jumper with heavily embroidered bright pink and bright red. You can see these in the photographs of Sergei Podogorsky, who's a wonderful chemist photographer who was active at the turn of the century, who did a whole series of photographs of the Russian countryside for the Tsar. There's a wonderful book called Photographs for the Tsar that includes all of these. So one of the reasons that I was really interested to sort of look at these dolls is because they're probably one of the best known types of object that's turned on a lathe. Apart from Windsor chair legs, there are relatively few things that are kind of really in common parlance nowadays that are instantly recognizable kind of icons that have this rotational symmetry and this really characteristic silhouette. I was really surprised, actually. I thought the way they were made, probably from a single block of wood, where sort of each doll was carved somehow out of the one before it, which just tells you that I personally am not a wood turner, because there's no way that you could do that. The inside basically turns to sawdust. A cylinder of birch wood or linden wood is put on a lathe and smoothed. The bottom is carved out first, the top is carved out second, and then they're put together and smoothed so that they're the exact same diameter. And then that piece is handed off to somebody else who paints it, which echoes a kind of gender divide in the craftsmanship that's common to a lot of crafts. That's true of the sort of traditional China painting, where men would throw the pot and women would decorate. Men typically turn wood, and women typically paint. And so what they'll typically do is use a compass to create a perfectly round face, and then freehand draw with a black pen all of these details, and then sort of fill in the bright colors that sort of give all the clothing they're wearing. And they've evolved into this kind of metaphor. I don't mean to trigger anybody's political anxiety, but I brought a visual aid from the New York Times, which is just a very kind of general allusion to the nesting doll as a metaphor that, since, for many, many decades, this has been kind of a sense of layered meaning, or kind of an identity hidden behind another identity, or sort of peeling the onion to solve the mystery. And they have a long history of also being tied into politics. Nava was just saying she likes to collect political matryoshka. You can find antique sets and contemporary sets that have sort of all of the Soviet premiers from the very beginning and kind of graduated sizes. And the real kind of cool classic ones are the ones with Gorbachev on the outside, because that's the biggest doll, and then that's where it stops, and then they just get tacky. But so what's so neat about the Centuries collection is these are all from the 20th century. We don't know exactly when, although this one says made in the USSR, which indicates that it was made for export, somewhere in the Soviet Union. So we know that it was sometime between 1917 and 1991. And painted in that traditional style. These guys, which look very serious and a little bit dreary, are from East Germany. And Germany, as it turns out, these are probably It's kind of a sub-policeman. He has sort of like a little baton and a very serious-looking hat. Germany was a very big, and still is to some extent, toy producer. And they made a lot of nesting dolls for export. So it could be that this, during the Cold War, even East Germany got in on the act and they produced this set, which is kind of, this one's in a little bit better condition, you can see the blue. And these guys, which are my favorite for obvious reasons, because it's a set of cats, were made in China. And they look to me like they might be a little bit more recent because the paint looks so fresh and kind of unworn. But there's something different about these, which is that they're made in composite parts. So the entire thing could not have been turned in one go because it has the ears and the head, which is its own turned piece this way. And it's like that. So, with that, does anybody have questions about nesting dolls? Yes.
Why do you suppose, I mean, why, it was something that's so connected to its own religion and culture.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, why the appeal universally, and then why the effort to explore, to build these craft-based businesses? Still, they're hand-turned.
Yes, they're still handmade.
Foreign production of these things, so.
Like why? Yeah, what's the appeal? I think it's interesting. There are a ton of YouTube videos, amazingly, about Matryoshka dolls, and they're still, I mean, if YouTube is to be believed, largely handmade. And because, as you say, there's not really a way to mass produce these. I think part of it is their simplicity is kind of irresistible. That they have this iconic silhouette that always looks almost the same, even when it's a cat. It's kind of similar. Miniatures. We were just talking about this beforehand. That miniseries that's on PBS, The Miniaturist. People are obsessed with miniatures. There's this kind of magic about small things that people love to collect, and they store, and they're relatively, they're sort of simple to play with and relatively sturdy.
There's an economy of space.
Yeah. If you're a collector and you have a lot of objects, as many of us do, they can,
There's also a surprise element, especially with the latest version.
The tiny.
You don't know. There's two elements. One is what's the next one when they change up
the layer.
And then the other is how small can we go?
Right. And there are records. There are Matryoshka dolls have been made, yay big, and there's 47 layers, and then the tiny one is as tiny as you get, grand price. It's the element of surprise. It's kind of that thing at the birthday party when you unwind the ball and there are toys. It's special.
I would add to that there is a level of connoisseurship that's connected to the size of the smallest one and the level of detail that's invested in the surface decoration of that tiny one.
Because you made the point also, which is that as far as wood goes, and we are in a space right now where we're surrounded by breathtakingly detailed, incredibly crafted pieces of wood, the craftsmanship is not mind-blowing. It's turned, and that takes skill. You have to know what you're doing. You don't just want to wing it on a lathe, but it's not sort of a level of complexity, let's say, akin to this sculpture. So it's not so much, kind of can you do it at all, but can you do it well? It's, kind of making your favorite soup really well, right?
And I think there's a level of industry to it that isn't inside of for this object. There must be a production, how quickly can you do it? The skill must be measured with
how well
of production. Because you get the crabs and some,
and the wood for different quality.
Yeah.
There are certain things, like you're supposed to age the wood for 2 years, apparently that makes a difference. You're supposed to use starch to seal it before you paint it, that makes a difference. So I think those things are probably shortcuts that if they don't get followed, you end up with a kind of shoddy, not quite, made to stand the test of time set.
Do you have an idea of the price points?
That's a really good question. I don't think they're dirt cheap, but I don't have a sense that they're exceedingly expensive either. Although I also noticed that there's a market for corporate gifts. One of the YouTube videos I saw had a set that was made for Comcast, and it has the word on it original painting, and they were making them by the thousands, and it was, I can only assume it was sort of meant to be, a special gift for a holiday or something. And there were a few others like that I saw. There were people, and these were being made in very traditional, family operations. They were, turning them piece by piece. But that there's not, they're not cranking them out in the sense that, just for sheer quantity. There is a sense of kind of wanting to customize and kind of, so yeah, I think that's a good question. The collectible ones are probably quite costly, I would think. Yes?
Did you talk about why they are called matryoshka?
I actually didn't, but it's because
It means little mother.
it means sort of
And so it's mother with
a diminutive.
a diminutive.
Yeah.
And I also wondered, since there are so many other Russian things that are turned, like eggs, there's the tradition of the pisanki and those, if there's also some sort of thing about fecundity.
I think it must be, because that's one of the theories. The sort of prehistory of the Abramtsievo doll, like what came before that and where did the idea come from. One of the leading theories about that is that it was inspired by turned hollow eggs that are inspired themselves by the pisanki. So it's this kind of springtime Easter fertility, and it's kind of literal, right? It's kind of a person coming out of another person, so it makes sense. the little mother.
Well, if there are no further questions, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you'll come back next month. We're opening a new exhibition, so we're going to give object lesson a break. But in December, we have woodturner extraordinaire, Mark Speary, who is a new book, who's going to come and talk about some of the collections. So keep coming back every first Friday at 5:30. Thank you so much.